What's happening out there, rotoscouts baseball fans? Hopefully you guys had a good night last night. I know I had a nice little hit on FanDuel on the back of Miles Mikolas having a monster day, which we were all over. Hopefully you guys followed that one in the old pitching projections. But hopefully everybody's having a good Wednesday, regardless of how yesterday went. MLB DFS, new day every single day, right back to the grind. So yesterday doesn't matter anymore. Hopefully today's going well for you. The dog just started licking my foot, which is a weird feeling to have while I'm talking to you guys. But hey, that's what's going on over here. Oh, good. He just got up and walked out of the room, so hopefully he'll keep down, leave us alone for the next hour or so as we go through tonight. We've got a split slate tonight. We've got 7 games starting at 6:40 on the FanDuel slate, and we've got 6 games starting at 7:05 on the DK slate. So we'll go through the first game in just a minute, but I'll let everybody trickle in over the next couple of seconds while I just kind of shoot the shit here. Just mute that guy right now. So we've got a couple people watching right now. Larry C's in the chat, as always. What's going on, Larry? Good to see you, buddy. So yeah, welcome to the show. We're going to go game by game, talk about everything. Everything's also written up on the website over at Rotoscouts. Hopefully everybody's been checking that out and doing well with the content. I know our pal Ricky's had some good hits with some of our home run content he was just telling me, so hopefully the models are working well for everybody. Just making sure I've got everything set here. Excuse me while I look away for 1 sec. Yeah, we're good. All right, so with that, we've got a handful of people in the room already. Welcome, everybody. 9 people watching. It's excellent, and I appreciate all the views, all the likes, and everything from yesterday. I know Gunn was a big part of getting people over here, so, thank you to anybody who's joined us a second day from that group. We really appreciate you hanging out, and, yeah, it was cool having everybody jump over here, and he and I talked again. I think we're pretty firm for we're going to do a show like this time of day, probably this coming Friday. We're going to jump on together and do a show, so that'll be a blast. But let's dive in. Let's get started with this one. Nobody's here to talk about that kind of stuff. Let's let me jump back to this. I'm going to click over to this presentation, and away we go. First game on deck, I think, is an interesting one. It's the FanDuel only game. I think we've got a good pitcher going in Blake Snell, obviously, right? This is a very good starter over time, a premium strikeout guy, but he's a pitcher who definitely has warts when it comes to DFS. For one, he always walks way too many. He's always bumpy. He's a roller coaster. He can have a dynamite start, but his other kind of hamstringing effect is that he doesn't pitch deep into games. Pretty much as a rule, 50 innings in 10 starts. You can kind of see that just in if you average that out to what he's done over time. Some of them will be deeper than others, of course, but he's a guy who tends to walk too many, throw too many pitches, and ends up coming out of games early. So I never fully trust Blake Snell, but he is actually projected at the top of my FanDuel board. That 29.9 is the highest projection on my FanDuel board today. There's a bunch of guys that are like 29.9 to 26.5, something like that. There's a nice big group of pitchers that are all basically looking the same. We've got kind of a mixed bag of pitching. There's some good pitchers going up against interesting to tough matchups, and then there's just some really lousy, clunky pitchers that I think we can attack with bats. So it's a good slate. It's an interesting slate, but Snell is a good example of that. He doesn't project over the 30 mark for me. I think he's a little higher across town in some other sites, and I know Grinders has Hunter Brown projected about 10 points higher than I have him, which I think is interesting. He's going to need to get some strikeouts to support that. I think they're not wrong. Neither one of us is wrong, regardless of how it goes, right? But I question if they ding him for a little bit of power if he makes a mistake. That team is pretty hard hitting. We'll get to that. We'll talk about Hunter Brown in a bit, but that's the one outlier projection when I was comparing my model across different numbers today that I'm curious about. But he's right there with Blake Snell in my numbers, so we'll see how the pitching goes today, but it's going to be interesting up at the top of the board. The other question mark that I have with Blake Snell, and I wrote about it today, is the Marlins have been outstanding against left-handed pitching this year. And I'll jump over to my article so I can just quote some of the stats. As a team, the active roster, 323, 368, 506 against left-handed pitching. Their batting average is best in baseball at 323. Their on-base percentage is 3rd ranked. They are, I think it was 5th overall. Where is it? Regardless, they're one of the, I can't find it now. Padres active roster says blah, blah, blah. The Marlins are actually baseball's best team for run creation. 183, that was what I was looking for. They got a 183 ISO against lefties as well. That actually ties the Padres on the other side in the split against left-handed pitching this year. So I think the Marlins could actually be a little bit frisky, a little bit interesting. Ignore the dots right now just because of the way this average is with Tatis and Soto up here. It's just kind of pulling the average away from everybody else in these dots. So that's not the best way to present that right now. The Marlins top end actually projects okay, and I think they're a good value option for stacking on this FanDuel slate. This confirmed version of the lineup. Brian De La Cruz, I think, is very interesting. He's actually a pretty good hitter. 7 home runs already on the season, a 125 WRC plus. He's slashing 301, 351, 468. So I think there's a little bit of pop in that bat, and I definitely think is a nice correlated scoring piece. If you're looking at Jorge Soler, all his power, 17 home runs at 305 ISO, just significant power bat who is in that peak form. You get dips and dives with Soler, and it tends to happen on like a yearly basis with this hitter. But when you get him in good years, this appears to be one of them. So I think we smashed that. Deadly hitter against left-handed pitching. Luis Arias, the best hit tool in baseball. He's hitting 376, 432, 462, 147 WRC plus. Doesn't hit for any kind of power, but a great correlated scoring piece. Yuli Gurriel, quietly back to life in terms of the hit tool at least. He's creating runs 13% better than average, playing primarily against lefties from what I've noticed. He's in there from time to time, but only 136 total plate appearances. But slashing 289, 353, 430, somewhat respectable. Not hitting for any power really, a 0.9% power rate and 34.3% hard hit. But just nice to see him rounding out his career with a decent average after he won a batting title 2 years ago and was just outstanding. Just got here way too late because of being restricted in growing up in Cuba. John Birdie, last year's National League stolen base leader with 41, only has 7 this year, only getting on base at a 326 clip. It's not ideal, 14% worse than average creating runs. I'd rather have Birdie at the bottom or the top of the lineup than hitting 5th here. Kind of a weird spot to have that hitter. He's cheap though, 2,600, 3-position eligible. I mean, that's fine for for FanDuel purposes, and I think there's a little bit of value. We never really talked about this column, by the way. This is a value column. It's just kind of like an odd duck value formula that should show like a little bit of projection versus price with a little bit of my power index factoring into it as well there. So gives you an idea. The better numbers, obviously, good players for the money. So we were talking John Birdie. Gene Segura has just been dead. They should give this job to somebody else. I said that in the article too today. 0.031 ISO, 38 WRC plus, below the Mendoza line in 177 plate appearances. Somebody in the front office must owe him money or something like that. But it is rough for Gene Segura so far this year. Bottom of the lineup, Garrett Hampson, Jonathan Davis. If you want to go that route, that's fine. Hampson has the idea of a decent hit tool and some speed. Jonathan Davis was landed at the bottom of this lineup, was showing he's doing it again. Actually, I've never seen this before. He's got a 0.00 in the home run model. There must be something funky going on with like his career ISO or something in my model. I got to look into that and see if I can update that or something. But I've never seen anybody land at 0.00. The perfect Dean Wormer. Trey McKelly says, hey, finishing workout with a cool down at the park. Nice. Right on, buddy. Enjoy. Soler's been the best individual hitter in MLB this year versus left-handed pitching. He just crushes against him. Absolutely, Devin. He just mashes lefties. He mashes righties, too, when he's hitting for power. But, yeah, he has just been outrageous this year. So, definitely love that spot for Jorge Soler. I'm actually surprised his home run mark is not a little higher than the 9.25 that we're seeing here in the model. So we talked through the Marlins side of things. Braxton Garrett on the other side for 8,600. You can see it's not a good projection for him, but he's not like completely off the board, given that the Padres are not a great lineup. They're kind of top heavy. He's an okay strikeout pitcher, 12.4% swinging strike rate and a 30.4% CSW. I actually think he should be a better strikeout pitcher than this. 22.6% strikeout rate over 48 innings this year. I think it was 24 and change at 24.1% in 88 innings last year in 17 starts. So I think Garrett's a little bit better than he's been this year, which is telling in the xFIP versus ERA. 4.50 ERA versus a 3.57 xFIP, only walking 5.3%. So I think he's good enough to give you a few clean innings against this team, find some strikeouts against this team. Not completely off the board, but doesn't really come through in the projection. Segura's still at like 17 mil. Yeah, that makes sense. Maybe they can pawn him off on some contender that has a misperception of him as like a quality player down the stretch or something like that, and just get him out of there. But that's not good for a team that should be on the rebuild. They've got that what's that kid's name? Xavier Edwards, I think. I'm pretty sure that's his name, the speedy kid who plays second base that would kind of be blocked there. I think he'd be more interesting. There's a lot of different things they could do with that spot. So looking, again, like I said, Garrett won't be a highly exposed pitcher for me, certainly. But if I had a few shares on the FanDuel slate, he's probably going to be really low owned. So I think it's an interesting enough spot that you can get away with, 5-10 shares and you'll probably be over the field on it. I don't know what anybody's got him projected for ownership. I haven't looked, but I think it's somewhat interesting. So Snell, definitely the preferred of the two pitchers, but I think there's warts on the play. It projects well. He only costs $9,000 with the idea of better strikeout upside than he's shown so far this year. The walks are always a problem. He's given up too much premium contact. Like, that's the other thing about the Soler play. If you're throwing a guy who's got 12.1% barrels against so far this year, 3.98% home run rate, like, this play is right into Soler's upside. So definite upside for the Marlins bats. I think they're interesting. I'm curious to see what their popularity is going to land at. That's going to be a determining factor in how much I get to, but I would definitely like to be involved in some of this top end at those prices. Bottom end is meh, and that'll question like whether they can turn the lineup over, but we're always dealing with that when we go to this type of a team, type of a play. If you go to the Padres, obviously we're seeing good projections, good value too on Tatis and Soto. 3,700 is just too cheap. Those guys, I don't care how they're performing current season, those guys should never be below like the $4,000 line on a FanDuel slate. That said, 158 plate appearances, 9 home runs, 5 stolen bases for Tatis. It's not like he's been bad. 219 ISO, a 108 WRC plus since he's come back. He's been perfectly fine. Soto's been good, 10 home runs, 430 on base, a 508 slugging percentage. I think people are a little hung up on the 268 average, which was a lot lower just a couple of weeks ago. Like, his hit tools really come back to life, finally. I was concerned about it, don't get me wrong, but he was still mashing the ball, 14.9% barrel rate, 58.2% hard hits, hitting for power, getting on base. Like, he was still Juan Soto. He just wasn't, the hit tool just wasn't in place for whatever reason. So that's come around. Soto's a star. I have no issues going to him. He's too cheap. Nice value there. Bogarts has been terrible in May. I was looking at his May numbers. He's slashing, that's in the article too, but if I can find it quickly, at least he's in bold. For the month of May, 192, 282, 261 with a .065 ISO, 58 WRC plus after he basically carried this team in March and April. So interesting spot for Xander Bogaerts, but he's appropriately priced for the dip at 3,100. That's too cheap for him. He's a star caliber player over a long stretch of time. We know that about Xander Bogaerts. Ha-Seong Kim, if you get him in that second spot, maybe a little bit of value, multi-position, 2,700, has the ability to hit one out of the park, steal you a base, so not uninteresting up there. Cronenworth, underperforming. Nelson Cruz, meh, not really the Nelson Cruz versus a lefty that we used to get. This season, total 3 home runs. 2 of them are against lefties, but only a 147 ISO this year, 83 WRC plus on the whole. It's past time for Nelson to say goodbye at this point. Brendan Dixon, Jose Azocar, Austin Nola, whatever you get at the bottom end, it's kind of weak. We know that about the pods. They run kind of thin, just like a 1 through 5 type play. Jump to the next game. We'll welcome in the DraftKings slate. Let's see if we got confirmed lineups for this one yet. Oh, good. Couple lineups dropped. Let me grab these. We've got both of them. Good. So I'll drop these in real quick as we talk this through. We've got the Brewers coming in. Christian Yelich in the leadoff spot, kind of like what we expected. That one looks basically like we expected. Ooh, I like this. Abraham Toro, I think you guys can see that. Abraham Toro hitting 6th instead of 9th is quite interesting. We'll talk about that in just a sec. Let me get the Blue Jays in. Blue Jays lineup dropping in. Oh, I wanted to ask you guys too. Let me know in the chat if you can hear like a little kind of a background buzz. Gundacker pointed it out to me that there was it's faint when I was listening to it on speakers, but I imagine it's probably more annoying on headphones. I think my microphone cord was just tangled up with a cell phone charger that I had plugged in over there, so I undid that. So I'm hoping that just fixed it, little electrical interference or whatever. But if you guys are hearing a little buzz or hum or something like that, you do hear it, Trey? Damn. All right. Well, I will see if I can figure out what that might be with this mic. Maybe I just need to turn this down a little bit. Is that? Let's see. That's all the way up, so that's probably too much. Maybe I just had the volume up a little bit. Feedback. Yeah, I don't know what it would be getting feedback from, though. There's nothing else really on. Maybe I turn these off? I don't have anything playing over those speakers, but maybe maybe the speakers were up a little bit and that did it. I don't know. I didn't think it's as bad today as it has been. Okay. Yeah, I hadn't noticed it until Gunn pointed it out, and then I could hear it. It's there, and I am deaf. All right, Wes. That's one way to go. All right, so I will see what's going on with that. This is a new mic, and it's a decent one, so not sure what that would be, but maybe it's something in the settings that I can tweak. Let me pull it up real quick. I know this is exciting. The other day when I turned off the echo cancellation, it was that fixed whatever there was an initial like stop and start. I doubt that that's what it is. Often used by musicians for stereo audio. I don't think we need to worry about that. Oh, I'll screw around with it later on. All right, thanks for the feedback there, guys, and let's just move on with this. We'll deal with the sound today, and hopefully I'll get it fixed by tomorrow. So confirm lineups on both sides in this one. I think we're going to bats on both sides here. Alek Manoah has not been the pitcher that he used to be. 18% strikeout rate over 53 and 2/3. 53 and 2/3, 11 starts, 14.9% walk rate, a 5.85 xFIP, 5.53 ERA, giving up way too much premium contact. Like, Manoah is priced down, but it's for a reason. 6,900, 8,000. That's like about right for how he's been this year. If you want to throw darts, I don't totally mind it because he has been good in years past. I mean, we're talking about a guy who just last season, 22.9% strikeout rate, a 2.24 ERA, 3.98 xFIP, a 0.99 whip, limited power significantly, 5.4% barrels, 31. Like, this is really telling, right? 5.4% barrels up to 8.4%, 31.5% hard hits up to 42.8%, 2.4% home run rate to a 3.53. I mean, that is a big jump for premium contact and power. Striking out fewer hitters, the big dip in swinging strike rate, the big dip in CSW percentage. It's been ugly from Manoah. So I kind of want to see him figure it out a little bit more before I'm really throwing shares at him. At 6,900 on the DK slate as an SP2, I think it's probably is worth a few darts. At 8,000 on the FanDuel slate, I don't know if I need to go there. This Brewers team is not great, but that's that's standing out more as a value play to me with their cheap pricing, multi-position eligibility. Like, I kind of like the ability to move a lot of Brewers around the slate at cheap prices and kind of attack Manoah's underperformance this year. So he's not really a factor for me. Like I said, though, 6,900 is fine on the DK slate, and $8,000 darts on FanDuel are not completely out of line. Like, don't get me wrong, it is a play that could hit based on his previous performance, but it's just not been pretty and it's not looking good tonight. So for me, I'm going to kind of go away from it. I'm going to lean into the bats on both sides here. If I'm looking at the Brewers bats, Christian Yelich off the top for 3,300, 4,400 across sites, 251, 343, 401. It's not great for Yelich. It's definitely not the MVP numbers that we used to see, but I've mentioned it a ton of times, 53.2% hard hit rate. He still always hits the ball hard. He just doesn't elevate it frequently enough. So 7 home runs, 11 stolen bases, counting stats are okay. I think you still go to Yelich. You're getting him at a discount for what his talent could be, should be. I don't know what the right way to phrase that is, but we know that this is a guy who's been better in the past, right? So it's a guy I still have faith in, and I think the price is correct for who he is right now. So we're not we're not overpaying for him. If the ownership, ignore these ownership numbers, by the way. These are yesterday's. I usually hide those. Those are yesterday's numbers from Stochastic, so they're meaningless today anyway. I wasn't intending to show that, but they weren't today's anyway, so don't worry about it. I was saying that the Brewers, we're looking at Brewers bats. So Owen Miller's been really interesting. 3-position eligibility, second, third outfield on the FanDuel slate, second and third on the DraftKings slates. Cheap, 3,100, 2,800. Has had a nice year in 128 plate appearances, 328, 367, 504. Creating runs 36% better than average. A little bit of power, a little bit of speed, 4 home runs, 6 stolen bases. I think that's an interesting enough player that you can click him into lineups between Yelich and Rowdy Tellez, who's obviously interesting. I don't think anybody doubts Rowdy Tellez at this point. 12 home runs, a 256 ISO, a significant power bat, 11.4% barrel rate, 42.1% hard hits. I really like Rowdy Tellez, and he's having a decent year in terms of the hit tool, 250, 339, 506. That's keeping him involved. So I like Rowdy here. William Contreras, decent power bat as a catcher, went deep last night, 6 home runs on the season, 178 ISO, 10.5% barrels, 45.6% hard hits. You like to see there's a decent amount of barrels and hard hits through this lineup, right? So we like to see that. Brian Anderson is still multi-position eligible and cheap on both sites, but he's cooled off a lot since most of these 8 home runs came early in the season. Most of any of the remaining production here came earlier in the season. So you're getting him at about probably the right prices in this spot for Brian Anderson. Toro, who I mentioned, though, I do think is interesting. 2,400, 2,000. Those are very cheap prices for a guy second base, third base eligible. Only one plate appearance so far this year, so hasn't done much, obviously. 352 plate appearances last year, 10 home runs. He didn't deliver on what we thought talent-wise might be there based on some minor league numbers. So it's not great, but I do like the 10 home runs and 352 plate appearances, and I do think there's more than that in that player. So when we get him at mid price, hitting 6th in this lineup against a problematic pitcher, I think there's upside there. So I don't know what the ownership's going to look like. I'm curious to see that, but I think Toro's a player, and I think this is a good spot for him. Another thing I should point out about him, 18.5% strikeout rate. So he's putting the ball in play fairly frequently. That's last year's number. So he put the ball in play fairly frequently. He got unlucky to a degree. You saw the low end triple slash and only 10 and the 10 home runs. So got unlucky to a degree, but I think there's power upside. I think there's speed upside in that player. So I'm curious about that spot. Bryce Turang, Victor Caratini, Joey Weimer. Caratini's got the upside to hit you a very cheap, totally unowned home run as a catcher at 2,700 on DK. I don't think you're making a mistake there. 2,500 on FanDuel, you're probably stretching it. Like, it's not an expensive price by any means, but you need to build a solid handful of Brewer stacks, I think, before you're playing Victor Caratini shares on FanDuel. But 56.1% hard hit rate in his 70 plate appearances, 2 homers on the season. I think there's a little bit of sneaky upside for the switch hitting catcher there, so it's not terrible. The Blue Jays are showing massive power through the top end here against our old pal Julio Teheran. Julio made one start so far this season, threw 5 innings the other day. He struck out, I think, 5 Cubs, gave up 1 run in that. I wouldn't be surprised if that's his best outing in this season. I do not believe. He's a pitcher who's had home run problems in the past and throughout his career. I just believe significantly more in what I'm seeing on the Blue Jays side of this one. Those are massive home run totals. The top 3 hitters in the lineup are doubling up the magic number in our home run model. We've got Dalton Varsho, no Brandon Belt, which sucks. Brandon Belt was my home run pick for the day. That blows, but left-handed hitting Dalton Varsho in that spot, hitting cleanup for similar pricing, that's also a bargain. There's power in that bat. He's got 8 home runs on the season, only slashing 212, 277, 369. Kind of a disappointment so far, but I believe in the upside for that player. I believe in the power. Had a 10.2% barrel rate. That's down to 7.5% this year. So that's where the power's gone, but I do think there's potential there. Love the top 3, obviously. You're getting them at star prices. I'm sure they'll be popular in this spot against Tehran, but I think they're worth it. And I think there's plenty of ways to offset their popularity by going to other teams, going to mix and match pieces and just putting them together in different combinations. You get down the bottom of the lineup, Matt Chapman hitting 5th is now at a discount again, 4,600, 3,600 across sites. Most of his production also came earlier in the season, but I think he's a star caliber or has star output in spurts, and you can still see that in the 21.4% barrel rate, 60.7% hard hits for the season. Whit Merrifield, Alejandro Kirk, Calvin Biggio, Kevin Kiermaier, all super playable from the bottom of the lineup. I talked about Kiermaier yesterday. Interesting numbers to start the year, over 154 plate appearances, and he attributes it to wearing contact lenses for the first time and actually being able to see the ball for the first time in his long major league career. So that's kind of interesting. Keep an eye on it going forward, but any one of those guys, or even 2 of those guys in combination with some of these other hitters, depending on where you're playing, I think are totally viable. They're all at cheap prices. They fill a bunch of different positions, so there's value there. Kevin Biggio, not a great hitter, but does have 4 home runs on the season. Certainly not a good major league career so far. Kirk can hit you a home run as a cheap catcher. Merrifield can steal your bases, get on base, be a nice correlated scoring piece. So from that one, it was no real interest in either pitcher. Significant interest in the Blue Jays, and fairly strong interest in the Brewers as a value stack with multi-position eligibility across both sites. Like, look at all this: 4 guys with multi-position on the DK slate, all at relatively cheap prices, or actually aggressively cheap prices, and 3 guys here, one with 3 position eligibility, all at very cheap pricing on the FanDuel slate. The Brewers are interesting going up against struggling Manoah here. Here is the Reds, for somebody who was just asking about it in the chat. They're going up against Jimmy Paxton, who you can see, 29.18, rivaling Snell for the top spot in the pitching model, but I do think there is upside in the Reds lineup today as well. It's a Kevin Newman up top version of the lineup. Kevin Newman, Matt McLain, Jonathan India, Spencer Steer, Tyler Stevenson. I kind of like this version of the lineup. This is the first time I'm seeing the confirmed. So Kevin Newman I don't love, but 269, 333, 361 is at least somewhat playable. Like, he gets on base at an okay clip. Most of his production's, the 14% below average. I think most of his plate appearances have been lower in the lineup this year. He's not great, but he's cheap. 2,600, 2,500, fill shortstop or second base on DK, shortstop on FanDuel. I wouldn't play him over Matt McLain too many times, though. Like, McLain is a much better hitter. He's a rookie. He's only made 63 plate appearances in his career, sitting 357, 429, 554. He was raking in the minors before they called him up, to the point where like they might have chosen him over Ellie De La Cruz, their premium prospect. I think Ellie needed a little bit more time before they wanted to call him up anyway, but McLain got here first, which is super interesting. 10.99 to lead the team in our home run model here. So I think you can throw some of these righties. It's an entirely right-handed lineup going up against Paxton, but Paxton surprised in his first 2 starts at least. He was bad in the last start, 3 innings, I think 5 runs. That was ugly. But sitting 31.7% in the strikeouts in the 14 innings, 3 starts, 10% walks is ugly, 3.91 xFIP, 5.14 ERA. It hasn't been pretty, but it's not like the Reds are a good team, right? So I think there's upside on both sides of this, and that's how I'm going to approach it. I will have Red stacks, and I will have James Paxton. I would probably say, 1 through 7, the Reds are playable. I don't know how much you need Tyler Stevenson on the FanDuel slate, even 2,600. He's fine at value, but he hasn't really done much this year, hasn't really done much the last couple of seasons, so I don't love Stevenson. I think Stuart Fairchild's kind of interesting. Nick Senzel kind of interesting, though, over there. Senzel with 3-position eligibility for 3,000 on FanDuel, perfectly fine. I wish you would get multi-position on him. He'd be more valuable if he wasn't third base only on the DK slate. That kind of sucks. There are a bunch of more playable third baseman over there. 4,300 is fine as a value price. Senzel, former top prospect in baseball, never really clicked at the major league level, had a bunch of stupid injuries that hampered his production. 163 plate appearances this year, kind of not full-time role, but playing a decent amount. 264, 337, 396, 5% below average creating runs. Hasn't been great, but has been semi-productive. 4 home runs, 4 stolen bases. He's fine. So there's some interesting bats in that lineup. There are guys who limit strikeouts. Kevin Newman only striking out at 12.9%. India is their best player. 288, 372, 434 with a 115 WRC plus. And then Spencer Steer's been really good this year. I should call that out. 288, 353, 485 with a 197 ISO, 20% better than average creating runs, leads the team with 7 home runs in the cleanup spot. So Spencer Steer for 3,800, 3,200 is a very nice little piece of value there if you're going against Paxton. And I think it's perfectly fine. If you wanted to tell me I am taking Paxton completely off the pitching board, I don't want to use him, and I want to attack him with a lot of red stacks, I would not tell you that that's a mistake of a strategy. I thought Paxton was going to arrive basically shot. I think that was kind of the consensus. It's a big surprise that, not having really pitched relevant innings since 2019, he's kind of come back, just roaring back to life as the pitcher he used to be, at least in 2 starts. The third one was ugly. So we'll see what we get going forward. I don't fully believe. I think the not fully believing is baked into the 8,500 price on the DK slate. I'm hoping that people stay away from him at the 9,500, because I am probably going to land on some shares of him going up against what I do think is a bad Reds team here with strikeout upside. So uncomfortable recommendation for Paxton there. More comfortable recommending the Reds side of that, oddly, as bad as they are. And then taking the Red Sox against Luke Weaver here. I think it's kind of a no-brainer. You see, Weaver doesn't project overly poorly, especially compared to the Paxtons and everybody only 5 points ahead. That's a little bit of an outlier for a guy who's got a 5.45 ERA, a 4.35 xFIP, has given up a ton of power, has not been good throughout his career, but I think he's maybe a little bit better than the reputation. The xFIP tells us that story. It's a full run and change better than the ERA this year in 38 innings, 7 starts. 22.6% strikeout rates is league average-ish, a little bit above. I don't know what exactly the league average is right now, but that's ish. 11.2% swinging strikes is actually quite good. 28.8% CSW is fine. Only walks 5.5%. His problems are here, right? That could be attributed to happenstance if we didn't know that he had also done that in seasons past. So it's not great for Luke Weaver in terms of the premium contact that he allows, but could he sneak through on the idea of a few strikeouts at 8,200, 7,900? Probably not. It's probably a stretch. You might get this kind of a 22, 25-ish FanDuel points, a handful of strikeouts, kind of a game out of them. To get a win, to get a quality start, it just seems unlikely to me. I expect the Red Sox to drive the ball against him and to produce here. So I'm leaning more towards the Red Sox side of things. If somebody has a stronger argument for rostering Luke Weaver against the team with a 20.9% strikeout rate, I can't imagine. Yeah, Devin, Weaver's always struggled against lefties. Not sure I'll play him here versus Boston and Fenway. Yeah, that's also a great point. This is not a good park for a pitcher who has issues with lefties, and they've got several very good lefties in this lineup. They're actually, their best players are on the left side of the plate. So just even more reason not to roster Luke Weaver here. I just wanted to explain through why I thought he was maybe a little bit better than his reputation. So maybe something to keep in the bank when he comes in at a probably cheaper price after getting tattooed today against a worse team. Maybe you sneak him through for as a value play there. I do like to talk through some of these things that I spot as I'm meandering through writing these articles and everything. So we talk Weaver. Let's talk Red Sox bats, because like he just said, like Devin in the chat just said, Alex Verdugo, Rafael Devers, Masataka Yoshida, Jarren Duran, even Emmanuel Valdez for cheap late in the lineup, I think is interesting on the left side of the plate here. He's got 3 homers, 3 stolen bases, and 83 plate appearances this year. 92 WRC plus, not fantastic, but at 3,000, 2,700 filling infield spots, that's fine. But the interesting guys are obviously the top of the lineup. Verdugo's an excellent leadoff hitter, gets on base at a very nice 368 clip, creates runs 25% better than average. Devers is super cheap on FanDuel. 3,400 is a mistake price for Rafael Devers on FanDuel. That's, I guess, because he's only hitting 246 and getting on base at a 286 clip. But still, 13 home runs, 103 WRC plus is actually low for him, only 3% better than average creating runs, but still a 13.2% barrel rate, 51.6% hard hits, the 13 home runs, a 251 ISO. Like, I'm not worried about Rafael Devers. He should never be that low price. 6,100 is correct on the DK slate. Justin Turner, valuable veteran, cheap price, multi-positional. You can always go to Justin Turner. He gets involved, gets on base, creates runs, even if he's not hitting for a ton of power, and even with his average dipping a little bit, he's still getting on base at a 353 clip. You like that a lot. Yoshida, definitely a value bat, 5,500, 3,600, not value in the discount sense, but a valuable bat, I should say. 203 plate appearances, 313, 389, 486. Nice, 40% better than average run creation. I realized when watching this show back that I say nice constantly. I got to get away from that. Jarren Duran, good player, 3,700, 3,100 across sites. Lefty stick in the outfield, nice. Damn it! Immediately did it. An affordable 3,700, 3,100 price tag across sites, 293, 342, 466. Cooled off a little bit in the last 2 weeks from his ridiculously hot start, but I think he's a good player in that outfield. Enrique Hernandez, Connor Wong. I like Connor Wong better as their catcher. Nice little bat. This is going to take some work. I like Connor Wong better as their catcher. He's got an effective 10.4% barrel rate, a 42.9% hard hit rate for the season that it's turned into 5 home runs in 120 plate appearances at 234 ISO. Good catcher at 2,900, 2,500 at the bottom of the lineup. So especially where you need catchers, I wouldn't sleep on Connor Wong. Let's see if there's anything. Stephen Leibowitz said before I missed it. So you're saying we can't tell DK we want to roster 6 years ago, Julio Teheran? Yeah, that would be nice if we could get that guy. That would be a value play tonight. Let's go on to the next game here. Let's see if we get the Phils lineup in. We do. Most of these lineups are in. Grab the Phillies here real quick. We already had the other one. All right. I think we can use the Phillies bats to target poor Carlos Carrasco, who has been not great. He went a handful of innings. He pitched more effectively in his last start. He went 3 bad starts, missed like 3 weeks, came back, clunky start, and then a semi-effective start in his last outing. But I just don't think it's there for Carrasco right now. 6.75 ERA on the season, a 5.90 xFIP, only striking out 13.3% with an 8.7% swinging strike rate, 26.1% CSW percentage. I just don't think Carlos Carrasco is pitching effectively right now. So I think you could throw some Phillies bats at him. He's very cheap. If you wanted to argue the 6,400 on DK as an SP2 value, I think that's a playable price point anyway, for a guy who has certainly been an effective pitcher in the past, you're just, know what you're walking into and only do it a few times when you do it. If you're doing it, do it in large field tournaments across 150 lineups, 5 times. No more than that. It's probably not going to work. The Phillies bats definitely have interest in. They're probably going to be really popular, justifiably. They're cheap on the FanDuel slate. Like, look at these FanDuel prices. That is super, super affordable over there. They're relatively affordable on the DK slate, a little bit higher relative to the salary cap, but not significantly. Like, you're getting the Phillies at a nice value against this pitcher right now. So Bryson Stott dropped to a 96 WRC plus, but he's been effective in that leadoff role. 287, 323, 403 for the season. 5 home runs, 8 stolen bases. I like Stott up there at a cheap price. Trey Turner at 2,800. That is a major, major bargain for this player. I know he's not having a good season. 239 plate appearances, 240, 285, 378. 25% worse than average creating runs. We know that Trey Turner is a star at the shortstop position. We have significant evidence to support that point. 5,000 is too cheap on the DK slate, but 2,800 on the FanDuel slate. He should be massively owned at that price. Bryce Harper back in the lineup today, 5,800, 3,800 across slates. Also too cheap, especially on the FanDuel slate, where you can also get him at first base, which is fantastic. Grabbing Harper at first base and rolling through different lineup combinations with this team is terrific. I really like that spot a lot. He's been raking since coming back to the lineup, 39% better than average creating runs. Don't really need to sell you guys Bryce Harper, I don't think. Nicky Castellanos, I think perfectly fine, despite a little bit of a dip in terms of the power since the start of the season. 5 home runs total, 167 ISO, still creating runs 17% better than average and still hitting the ball effectively, though. So I like Nicky Castellanos at price. The price has come down with the production, particularly on DK, 4,400 over there. He's actually oddly remained a little bit high priced on the FanDuel slate at 3,400. That's probably like his correct price. I don't want to call it high, but relative to where everybody else has landed, that's not really discounting him for the dip in production, which is weird. Schwarber, massive power hitter, obviously 13 home runs on the season. Don't really care about the 166 batting average, 235 ISO, 14.2% barrels, 47.5% hard hits. You can sell me that all day long for 3,000 on the FanDuel slate, 4,600 on the DK slate against this pitcher. Absolutely, sign me up. 10.82 in the home run model to lead the team for Schwarber. JT Realmuto, not producing really for power so far this year. The barrels are down, the hard hits are down, 3 home runs on the season, a 170 ISO. That's okay, that's a serviceable catcher ISO, but it's not what he's done in the past. But he's still been involved, a 99 WRC plus, dipped slightly below average, but I still love Realmuto, and you can definitely go to him where you need catchers. I think he's playable at 2,900. That's a bit of a discount on the FanDuel slate for a very, very good player. Brandon Marsh, Cody Clemens at the bottom of the lineup, tons of power in those two bats. 5 home runs for Marsh, 4 home runs in 74 plate appearances for Cody Clemens, a 221 ISO so far this season, 10.9% barrels. Really like the 10.9% barrels for Clemens. Really like the 48% hard hits, 8.2% barrels for Brandon Marsh. 2,800, 2,300 on DK. Very, very cheap bats at the bottom of the lineup. And Edmundo Sosa is an effective enough hitter. 2,500, 2,400 at third base. I don't like, again, that he's a third baseman here. I wish he was a middle infielder instead, but he's an effective enough hit tool and the idea of a little bit of pop. I think you can get away with some shares of Sosa. 6 home runs and 326 plate appearances 2 years ago. He's an effective enough piece down there that nobody ever goes to, that I think he can get himself involved, right? You're not looking for a major home run outburst, but for some correlated scoring, a guy can get on base. It hasn't been doing it this year. I'm making a kind of a false argument that's not supported by these numbers that you guys are looking at here. So maybe that's just a discount play at the bottom of the lineup more than I'm thinking. Let me move on. I felt like selling Edmundo Sosa a little bit more. I had the idea in my head that he was had better numbers last year. I guess it was 2 years ago that were a little bit better. The 104 WRC plus the 6 home runs. Yeah, last year wasn't as effective as I was misremembering. So scratch that one a little bit. I think you'd still use him, but maybe not as effective as I was thinking as a value play for Sosa down the bottom lineup. Anyway, Nola against the Mets. This is a curious spot in this one. He's been struggling. This has been the theme of this season. good veterans struggling, both at the plate and on the mound, and Nola is definitely a part of that. His strikeout rate, we can see year over year, significantly down from last year. 29.1% strikeout rate last year, 21.7% this year, 10.7% swinging strike rate this year, down from 12.6, a corresponding dip in the CSW percentage, 4.59 ERA for a guy who had a 3.25 last year and a 2.77 xFIP last year with a 4.12 xFIP this year. It's not been pretty for Nola. A lot more hard hits, a lot more barrels, a lot more home runs. I don't know what's up. I was looking at his pitch mix, and if you, it's in my article if you want to scroll down to it. And hold on, let me shame the dog for a second. Joker, keep it quiet, buddy. Call it down. I'm trying to talk to the people here. So it's in my article, but I'll scroll down to it real quick because we gotta. It's fairly relevant. Yeah, he's lost about a mile an hour on his four-seamer, and he's changed up his pitch mix. So he's throwing a different mix of pitches that are now less effective to kind of cover up for the dip, I think, in his fastball velocity. So his curveball whiff rate has dropped from 39.4%, which is outstanding, to just 30.8%. Still good, but that's like a big offset for his strikeout numbers. He's throwing more curveballs, he's throwing more cutters, both of which have been ineffective for him. So it's concerning with Nola changing up what he does on the mound to maybe cover for a dip in quality in one of his pitches. So I'm not totally wild about him right now. He's a big part of my dynasty team, which is potentially problematic, but is also maybe affecting my overall opinion. But the numbers support the the dip in quality for Aaron Nola here. I do think you go to him. He projects out okay, 26.9. That's obviously competitive with the 29s that we're seeing at the top of the board. 9,100, 9,900. I think the dip in quality is baked in here. You're getting him against a fairly effective Mets lineup. There's obviously a Pete Alonso, a polar bear lurking in the heart of the lineup here that could jump out and attack him for 2 home runs. I don't love it, but I will own it. Let's put it that way. So I think you go to Nola. I think you roster some Mets on the other side. If you're going to Mets, you've got the oddly placed Jeff McNeil with his hit tool specialist who needs the ball to drop in for him. Has been effective, 289, 367 on the front end of his triple slash, creating runs 11% better than average this year. But McNeil to me is more a back end of the lineup hitter, or potentially a leadoff man. But he's a BABIP-based play. He's kind of miscast in that 3-hitter role. But he's fine. Second base and outfield eligibility for DFS purposes, 3,700, 2,900, hitting ahead of Pete Alonso, behind Nimmo and Lindor. That's a good spot in the lineup. That is an effective spot for a discounted DFS piece. Don't get me wrong. Totally playable there. I just want to set the right expectation for who he is as a 3-hitter. Brandon Nimmo, terrific leadoff man, 385 on base percentage, 34% better than average creating runs. Definitely, probably underpriced. Definitely can sign me up for some of that. Also has a 49.1% hard hit rate. So an effective hitter. Francisco Lindor has not been great this year. 10 home runs is good. 208 ISO fine. 104 WRC plus, lower than it should be. 227, 299, 435 for Lindor. That's why it's lower than it should be. But obviously a former star. Larry saying Nola's curve doesn't have as much of a break now as well. I have Nola on my dynasty team. Yeah, he's on my dynasty team as well. And yeah, that's potentially a part of the dip in the whiff rate on the curveball. We see a pitch that's formerly been one of his most effective pitches drop 9 percentage points in whiff rate. That's impactful. So that's a problem. Lineup generator. Yes, lineup generators and sim packages and all sorts of crazy stuff going on over there. Firm no comment. The Mets bats, we were halfway through that lineup when I got sidetracked, got derailed by sarcastic comments from our Cubs fan pal in the chat there. So Pete Alonso, obviously you're going to Pete Alonso whenever you want against basically any pitcher. 20 home runs on the season, a 320 ISO, 18.4% barrels. Another player I don't think I really need to sell to you guys. Brett Baty, interesting bat for only 3,200, 2,700 at third base. Very high-end prospect for this team. They called him up 127 plate appearances ago. He's got 4 home runs, exactly at league average creating runs. But what I love about what he's done early returns here, 9.3% barrels, 52.3% hard hits, 22.8% strikeout rate for that kind of contact from a rookie in making his first 127 plate appearances. That's outstanding, and an 8.7% walk rate to boot. Really like the spot for Brett Baty. I think he's going to grow into a very nice player for this team. Starling Marte has been terrible this season, but like I wrote in the article, his legs still work. 15 stolen bases on the season, only getting on at a 316 clip, so you need him to get on base, obviously, to exploit the speed. If he does, I think he can get you stolen base, might get involved in the run creation, but it hasn't been good. Dan Vogelbach, Mark Canha, Tomas Nido, kind of, low end final third here. You get the idea of some power maybe with Vogelbach. 52.1% hard hit rate for the season from the left side of the plate against scuffling Aaron Nola. Potentially some upside for cheap pricing from Vogelbach. Canha has been better in seasons past, has not been that good this season. 7% below average creating runs. Nothing really to speak of in the triple slash or the counting stats. Tomas Nido is a defensive oriented catcher. He's at the dead minimum if you just want to fill a roster spot with a catcher or need to on the DK slate for the minimum price, but we're not talking about much of an offensive threat here. 3 home runs each of the last 2 seasons, 161 plate appearances 2 seasons ago, 313 last year. Nothing to speak of in the power or run creation department for Tomas Nido. Like I said, good defensive catcher, but defensively oriented backup. Twins and the Astros, we probably have the confirmed lineups for this one as well as we take our time. No, Astros are in, the Twins are not, so let me grab the Astros here, we'll drop it in. And we'll see what we've got in this one. All right. There it is. So the Astros are going up against Louis Varland. Varland is an interesting pitching prospect. He's performed pretty well in 6 starts, 34 innings. In terms of his strikeouts, have been a little bit above average at 23.8%. His walk rate has been very good at 4.9%. A very good 12.3% swinging strike rate. 27.6% CSW is fine. He's got a 3.78 xFIP, which is good. A 4.24 ERA, which is perfectly serviceable for a young pitcher in his first 11 starts of his career, going back to last year. What you don't like about Varland is the 43.6% hard hit rate against, the 90.5 miles an hour of average exit velo, the 12.9% barrel rate that he's allowed, and certainly not the 6.29% home run rate that he's given up so far. So I think there's the idea of some power upside on the Astros side of things. They've kind of struggled, but you saw Bregman hit a home run last night. They've come around a little bit. You get the version of the lineup with no Altuve at the top of the lineup though today. So first time I'm seeing the confirmed. Mauricio Dubon, definitely a hit to the top of the Astros lineup here without Altuve. So you get Dubon, you get Jeremy Pena. Obviously, you can go to like a Pena, Jordan Alvarez, Kyle Tucker stack if you just want to 3-man it. I think Bregman is definitely playable at 4,800, 3,100 across sites, up to 7 home runs, a 103 WRC plus. He's probably not the Alex Bregman of old anymore, but I don't think he's as bad as he had been early to start the season. 3.8% barrels, 34.8% hard hits. We'll probably see that come up over time. So I like Bregman there. Tucker, like I mentioned yesterday, still expect to hit 30 home runs, steal 25 bases this season. He's got 7 on the year. Minor dip in power over the last month or so, but we'll be back to form. Still a 46.6% hard hit rate. Jose Abreu has been terrible, but is very, very cheap at first base. He plays every single day. So on the idea of just getting those plate appearances in, maybe there's something there at 2,800, 2,400, very cheap across sites. So if you're building a bunch of Astros stacks, I think you throw at least a few shares in. Chas McCormick, not been producing the way we want him to so far this year, at least for counting stats, 4 home runs, 4 stolen bases in 93 plate appearances. For DFS purposes, I think maybe you can get away with it, and he has been a good contact profile guy over the past few seasons, so I do like McCormick, and he's also created runs at a 106 WRC plus clip in that 93 plate appearances, despite 220, 304, 439 in the triple slash, 220 ISO. So you do like McCormick here at cheap prices, probably very low ownership. 107 WRC plus for Jake Myers is playable. Martin Maldonado, with that idea of the weird Martin Maldonado home run for very cheap as a catcher, totally fine to go to. If you saw the site early in the day, make sure that you double check the power index and the home run ratings. I updated Hunter Brown in the model. I thought it was relevant enough to run an update on Hunter Brown and capture some of his recent performance and alter the home run projections that we were getting against him. We were seeing not like gargantuan like the Toronto Blue Jays were today, but several above average marks. Gallo was at like 12 and change. Buxton, like the appropriate guys, right? It was basically doubling some of these marks, essentially. And that wasn't right against Hunter Brown, who's been outstanding at limiting launch angle 4.5 degrees and limiting home runs this season. 1.7% home run rate. He's given up some barrels, 8.8% barrels. He's given up plenty of hard hits, 44.9% hard hits, 90.8 miles an hour of average exit velo. So watch this be the slate where he makes 3 mistakes and gives up 3 home home runs after I went in and updated it. But I think it was important enough to capture that, and he was doing that last year as well. And just 2 starts, 2.9 degree average launch angle, 5.9% barrel rate. So I think it was relevant enough to call it out and to make sure that it was caught in the projections today. I'll do that this time of year. I was saying in our Discord, as we're hitting June, I'll start letting a little bit more, especially for specific guys like some of these premium pitching prospects, young pitchers who don't have full samples to back up what they've done over time. I'll start letting in some more of the more recent production a little faster than I normally do. And then we hit a point in like later in June where I'll just say, okay, now let's count the full first half, and we'll start working in some of the day by day stuff as we go. So it's just an interesting spot in the year, but it was definitely relevant and definitely impactful to where these guys were earlier in the day. With that in mind, I think the Twins are somewhat capped in terms of their home run potential because of that. And I also think Brown is a very good pitcher who has got a very good chance. You can see he's projecting right there with the top pitchers of the day. I think he's got a very good chance to dominate this team for strikeouts. 28.7% strikeout rate for the projected roster. That's close to his 28.1% strikeout rate over 10 starts, 57 2/3 innings. So to not undersell Brown when you just talk about the power, the ability to check home runs, he's a very good pitcher overall. Just came into the league fully formed this year, right out of camp, 3.12 ERA, a 3.08 xFIP, a little bit better than the ERA, 11.8% swinging strike rate, 29.5% CSW. Brown is very good. Like I said, he is the Devin Scott, yeah, damn, no Altuve. I was looking forward to leadoff home run potential for him against Varland. Yep, I absolutely agree with that. I like Altuve a lot, and I liked him in that spot a lot. So, yeah, that's a ding to the Astros lineup. But like I was saying, Hunter Brown, definitely a very strong play tonight. He is on one of the other sites over on the site that's similar to my site's name in the first 4 letters, but a different verb. No, that's not a verb. That's a whatever. A different second part of the compound word. Those guys had Brown significantly higher, about 10 points higher as their highest projected pitcher today, which I don't think is inappropriate going up against this Twins team. My projection just accounts for a little bit of power potential coming back the other way from the Twins. If you're going to Twins bats, you want Gallo, you want certainly some Eduardo Julien at the top of the lineup. You still believe in Carlos Correa, especially at the discount, 4,100, 2,900, very, very cheap. He's struggled for the season, 10% below average creating runs, 6 home runs, 211, 303, 378. Hasn't been good. Dealing with a foot problem, but in the other foot than the one that was worrying everybody in the offseason. You still believe in the 11.7% barrels, 42.3% hard hits, though. Buxton, at similar contact numbers, is actually down for production. His 11.6% barrels is down from 16.4% last year. His 40.5% is down 10 points from his 50.2% hard hit last year. He's not really produced in the triple slash numbers. They haven't been pretty, but still 14% above average, 227 ISO, 10 home runs from Byron Buxton, 5,400, 3,600. Maybe based on the current year numbers, he could be a little cheaper than that, but I don't think it's wrong. It's definitely cheap for who this player has been over time. Byron Buxton is a superstar when he's healthy. He just is in a little bit of a slump right now, but the power numbers are fine. So you go to Buxton. Alex Kirilloff at 3,500, 2,900, definitely interesting. 303, 439, 485, 66% better than average over the 82 plate appearances this year. That's compelling. Kirilloff is a guy who was a fairly highly regarded prospect, multi-position eligible on DK. I definitely think you go to the lefty there against Hunter Brown here. Royce Lewis, if you're going to Twin stacks, definitely involved. They raised his price. He's not at the min anymore, which is good, but they gave him third base eligibility, which is interesting. 3,000, 2,800, still super affordable for a former top prospect. Has been involved in his 9 plate appearances since they called him up. I like that spot. Max Kepler, I like the spot for power. If he can turn on one, if Hunter Brown makes a mistake to Max, I think it's going to travel. So you like Max here, 13.1% barrel rate for 3,600. I'll take that. So if I'm going to Twins bats, those are the interesting guys. Willie Castro hasn't had a bad season. 265, 324, 441, 4 homers, 9 stolen bases in 112 plate appearances. Not bad. Ryan Jeffers is a good power hitting catcher. 3 home runs in 87 plate appearances, a 197 ISO, 47.9% hard hit rate. That's a playable catcher bat at 2,600 if he's at the bottom of the lineup. Ideally, you'd like to get him a little higher in the lineup, but I think particularly where you need catchers, that's in play. So I'm looking at this one. I think Varland is not unplayable, certainly with the idea of some strikeouts. He just needs to pitch a clean game in terms of the power and limit the struggling Astros lineup. But he'd be the least interesting part, I think, here. I think if I was ranking, if I was talking about the different four corners, it would probably be Hunter Brown as probably the most appealing, like, two sections of this game, then probably Astros bats, then Twins bats, then Louis Varland. But I definitely think you've got four playable parts here at the very worst, and a very interesting Hunter Brown. Last two games, let me take a swig of coffee. Brought to you today by Plain Jane Coffee Mugs. Plain Jane, at your local 99-cent store now. Yankees versus the Mariners. Let's see if we've got any confirmed lineups. No confirmed lineups in this one. So we've got Clark Schmidt against George Kirby. I think this is an interesting pitching matchup. I like the pitchers on both sides, and it was carrying through in the run totals when I was writing the article earlier. I haven't updated run totals, but I can't imagine they've really spiked since I wrote the article earlier. You can see Yanks at only 352, and the Mariners 406. Those are not high run totals for these two teams. It's a 7.5 run total for the game. Kind of a tight line. I think we've got a case, two young pitchers who are both pitching well. I think you can go to the pitchers on either side, and I think you're getting a nice price, $7,700 for Clark Schmidt on both sites. I think is compelling. I think Schmidt is a good pitcher, 25.3% strikeout rate. Some of the numbers are a bit clunky because Boone was giving him a quick hook in situations where a couple runners on base, 1-2 outs. Boone yanks him, the reliever gives up 2 runs, and they're charged to him. So his 5.58 ERA is a little bit misleading. His 3.95 xFIP is probably a little bit more accurate, and he's been good for strikeouts, decent for walks. The premium contact is not pretty. 10.6% barrel rate, a 47% hard hit rate, 91.6 miles an hour of average exit velo. I definitely don't want to undersell the potential for power on the other side, potential for him to make a few mistakes, but he's been effective in 50 innings, 11 starts. You can see the average depth, obviously not strong there, so you question the ability to get to a quality start, but I think that's baked into the price here on both sites. $7,700, you don't worry about the quality start, obviously, on DK. That's a very good price for this pitcher, a kid who could come out and rack up a nice number of strikeouts here. Damn it. Rack up a solid number of strikeouts, a good number of strikeouts, a healthy strikeout total, any other way to say that. And then $7,700, the only handicap is the potential for the quality start. I think he could get there, and he's gone deeper into games in recent starts, so I think maybe we get to the quality start anyway. He's got to pitch well, obviously, but if we're rolling along, racking up some strikeouts, I think he's got a shot at it. And at $7,700, you don't necessarily need it. So I think we're looking fairly good there. Devin's calling out lefty splits in the chat. That's not inaccurate by any means. So you definitely worry about Kelnick, maybe some JP Crawford there, but their primary bats are on the right side of the plate outside of Kelnick. So you don't worry about that as much. There's definitely a lot of hard hit in this lineup, as you can see. There's a ton of hard hit. There's a ton of barrel rate through the heart of this order. They have some major power hitters. Eugenio Suarez, only 6 home runs and a 113 ISO because he had a weird start to the season, but sitting 10.1% barrels, 44.2% hard hit. That's down from 14.8% barrels, but I think he's on his way back to that kind of level. So he's a major power hitter and has been over time. Cal Raleigh had a great year for power last year. It's 8 home runs on the season this year. Teoscar Hernandez, 9 home runs this year, 11.5% barrels, 48.2% hard hits. There's a ton of strikeouts here, though, too. Every one of those hitters, Kelnick, 30.6% strikeouts, Suarez, 28.5, Cal Raleigh, 25.8, Teoscar, 33.8. Those are aggressive free swingers. So I think Schmidt's got upside here. You can definitely both sides it, but the run totals kind of support the idea that pitching on both sides is the better play here. So what I hope for is that neither pitcher is overly popular, just based on good teams on either side, better pitching options, and public perception. And you can see it's not like it's rolling through my projections, but for price, I'll take 21.46 as a median projection with the idea of a fairly significant ceiling there. So I think Schmidt's in play, and I think equally Kirby's in play. He obviously projects a lot better. He's higher priced, though, by $2,000 going up against the Yanks. It's not a great Yankees lineup, particularly with Rizzo out of it. Dennis says, I don't have a nice day anymore. Frankly, I don't bother with him. This is a George Carlin quote, isn't it? Yeah, that sounds like a part of a Carlin routine to me, I'm pretty sure. So I was rolling along talking about George Kirby being an effective pitcher. He's going up against the Yankees lineup that's really, we're down to like Aaron Judge and, Gleyber Torres, maybe DJ LeMahieu. It's not pretty for the Yankees right now with no Rizzo, no Stanton, no Josh Donaldson for whatever he's worth. It's been kind of ugly. So what you like with Kirby, 2.4% walk rate. He just pitches clean innings. He is an effective pitcher for control and command. Has a 20.1% strikeout rate over 63 innings, 10 starts this year. Was a little bit better last year for strikeouts, 24.5%. Was inducing a little bit more in the terms of the swinging strikes, but the Yankees can help him out in that department. 25.2% strikeout rate for the active roster. Even Judge, the superstar, is at 29.4% strikeouts. This is baked in with a 12.2% from Gleyber Torres, who's actually been pretty effective this year. 9 home runs, a 177 ISO from a guy only striking out 12.2% of the time, walking 10.5%. Gleyber's been pretty good at the top of the lineup. He's for the price, he's not the greatest player in the world, but he's effective enough. But also Willie Calhoun at only 12.4% and IKF at only 15.1%. That tells you how bad the rest of these strikeout marks are. So I think Kirby's got strikeout upside beyond what he's done at 20.1% for the season. Gets helped out a little bit and probably not going to get himself into trouble. Doesn't give up a ton in terms of home runs, 34.9% home run rate. Hard hit rate. God, that would be a target, 34.9% home runs. 2.76% home run rate, only 88.2 miles an hour of average exit velo, 5.1% barrels. Difficult to square up. So I like Kirby here. Think there's upside at price. I wish he was a little bit cheaper, but I think when you get him slotting in next to some of those other guys, probably similarly projected or a little bit lower projected, with the perception of going up against the Yanks, I feel like we're probably going to get him at lower ownership than he should be in this matchup. So I like going to shares of Kirby. You can take out shares of Yankees bats, certainly with Gleyber Torres, Aaron Judge, DJ LeMahieu maybe, and maybe like Volpe, Higashioka. That would probably be my approach to this lineup, depending on what's confirmed. There's a few mix and match parts in there, but I know IKF had a good night last night. He is terrible. He's not a good hitter. You can play him if he's hitting in the heart of the order for cheap for DFS purposes. It's fine. You saw it come through last night, but don't get your hopes up. He's not a good hitter over time. Jake Bauer is also not a good hitter, but he's at the dead minimum on DK. 3 home runs in 64 plate appearances with an 18.2% barrel rate, 48.5% hard hits. Like, maybe you get something out of him. Depends what comes out of this lineup. Volpe, I talked about, good counting stats, bad production overall. Went out and hit a home run last night, got himself involved. The counting stats have been great. The 9.9% barrel rate and 45% hard hit rate are great. Striking out 30.5% of the time, 198 batting average, 277 on base. Needs to get himself involved more. Needs to figure out how to draw more walks. He's drawing 9.5% walks actually. It's probably just a BABIP problem now that I'm thinking about it. So needs to get some hits to drop in for him, I guess, for the kid here. But productive enough counting stats, valuable DFS play. Greg Allen also, speed, very low end power, but can hit a home run like he did last night at low ownership. So very cheap at the bottom of the lineup. If you're going to Mariners, we kind of talked about the lefty power upside for Jared Kelenic. He's cooled in May, but still has 10 home runs on the season, a 241 ISO overall. Excellent hard hit rate from the left side of the plate. Been their best player so far this season. JP Crawford, nice on base percentage, good leadoff piece and correlated scoring piece. Ty France, also a good correlated scoring piece, both above average for run creation. Julio Rodriguez has struggled overall in the hit tool this year, but still at 200 ISO, 10 home runs on the season, 10% better than average creating runs, and an effective 11% barrel rate, 52.6% hard hits. Barrels have dropped a little bit, hard hits are up a little bit, so I think Julio will figure it out and will ultimately be fine. Eugenio Suarez, Cal Raleigh, we talked about those guys in terms of the power upside. Taylor Trammell at the minimum price on DK, 2,000. If he's in the lineup at the bottom of the lineup, you can play him. That's an effective enough power bat, or the idea of an effective power bat anyway. 52 plate appearances this year, 3 home runs, a 16.7% barrel rate, 45.8% hard hits in the tiny sample, 9.9% barrels last year in a 117 plate appearance sample. You can see the average isn't going to be supporting anything. It might be 4 holes in the lineup, with his 4 plate appearances, but 4 home runs in 117 plate appearances last year with an effective contact profile, I think is playable at the dead minimum on DK. I don't even need to get carried away with it at 2,600 on the FanDuel slate, to be honest. So that one was mostly pitching, to summarize. You can go to either lineup. There are effective bats in either lineup. You know who they are. But this one's more of a pitching spot for me. Last game on deck, we were talking about it a little bit in the Discord earlier in the day. Definitely think there is weird potential in Dinelson Lamet, oddly, making his first start in a couple of years. He's been pitching out of the bullpen out in Colorado, had been on the injured list, made 3 rehab starts, went 4 2/3 in his most recent rehab start, so he's moderately stretched out. I think it was high 60s pitch count. So I think I said 90 in the article. It might be more like 80. With 80 pitches and the idea of 5 innings, for 5,100, 5,600, there is upside in Dinelson Lamet. He was a major strikeout asset when healthy in years past. It has been a long time. He's actually only been around since 2017. As I was writing the article, I was doing his stats, and I was like, this dude's been around since the early aughts, or not the early aughts, the early what do we call those? Teensies? Whatever the hell they are. The early teensies. But it turned he was only a rookie in 2017, made 21 starts that year, 114 and a third innings, had a 28.7% strikeout rate when he was healthy that year, walked 11.1%, wasn't completely effective, but that was the year we were all like, oh, this could be something for fantasy. Came out the next year, 73 innings, 14 starts, 33.5% strikeout rate, cut his walks to 9.6, was very effective. That was 2018. I'm reading this in reverse order for some reason. The short 2020 season, he was 4th in the Cy Young voting that season. He made 12 starts through 69 innings. That's a full year if you're thinking about 2020. That was the weird pandemic year. 3.30 xFIP, a 2.09 ERA, struck out 34.8% of opposing hitters. That was his best year so far. And it's, again, small sample. But this is a dude who knows how to strike out major league hitters. In his 10 2/3 innings out of the pen this year, it has not been pretty. 22.8% strikeout rate, a 21.1% walk rate, a 5.87 xFIP, a 12.66 ERA. Whew, at least he's cut his ERA in half with his xFIP number, but a 5.87 xFIP is also not good. So, you take it with a grain of salt, but I do think there's at least the idea of strikeout value. If you get 80 pitches in 5 innings out of Lamet, you could chase strikeout upside for that price. It's a lot better as an SP2 on DK. There is a major question mark about any idea of even five clean innings. Very low chance of a win bonus, although the Rockies do look good against Tommy Henry here. Definitely, if he got, it would knock me out of my chair. I normally say that things wouldn't knock me out of my chair. If he got a quality start today, that would knock me the hell out of my chair. I do not see 6 innings here. I do not see a clean 6 innings. But on the idea of $5,100 SP2 strikeout upside, you could do worse. So moderate shares, very low end, very thin play, dart throws for large tournaments, but moderate interest. Tommy Henry on the other side, very low interest. Tommy Henry's had threw like 60 pitches in the last start, so it could hit 80, 85. Yeah, like I said, Larry, I was thinking it was 60 and change. It was 4 2/3 innings in the 3rd rehab start. I said 90 in the article, but it's probably more in that 80, 85 range. But he can find a solid handful of strikeouts for the price in that amount of pitches against this team. I do like the Diamondbacks, by the way. I'll get to that. And they are baseball's best team this year at limiting strikeouts against right-handed pitching. So that is an important factor to consider when rostering him against this team. We'll see which version of their lineup comes out, but it's a fairly reliable lineup. And you can see there are a lot of low strikeouts in this lineup. 19.8% total for the season against both hands, and it was a league-leading, it might have been the same number. It was 19 and change, let's put it that way, against right-handed pitching. So they've been effective at limiting strikeouts, and they've been producing runs, a bunch of decent home run hitters in that lineup. So I would not limit shares of Diamondbacks by any means. For every share of Lamet that I took out, I'd probably take 2 or 3 shares of Diamondback stacks, because I do think there's upside going back the other way. Devin Scott says, I like Carroll and Gurriel together. Totally agree. Really nice season for Lourdes Gurriel. I talked about it in the article and I've mentioned it on shows and in articles past, but came roaring back for power, already exceeded last year's home run total, and was still effective for the hit tool, the run creation last year, but sitting 312, 361, 554 with a 242 ISO, 9 homers in the books, creating runs 44% better than average. You're getting that triple slash, that kind of power, that kind of run creation from a dude who's only striking out 15.3% of the time. Lourdes Gurriel having a very nice little season. 48.1% hard hits, 4,400, 3,500. That's at this point, at least on the DK slate, that's a misprice. He should be more expensive than that. Corbin Carroll's kind of standing out to everybody now. 285, 374, 520, 235 ISO, 40% better than average creating runs, 9 homers, 16 stolen bases as a rookie. Absolutely, that's a dynamite player, but he's no secret. But I think Lourdes Gurriel, even at price, still kind of slips past people for what he's been this season and how good he's been. So definitely that's a great four-man right there. If you're just looking at this, from Ketel Marte down through Lourdes Gurriel, just take that as like a four-man if you like to talk about it in terms of cores. That's a dynamite core, and then you can click in shares of Jake McCarthy, Adaldo Perdomo. You can click in Josh Rojas isn't terrible. You can definitely use Pavin Smith from the top of the lineup. A little bit of power in that bat, a little bit of hit tool in that bat. So I like the Diamondbacks lineup from top to bottom, and I will have plenty of shares. I just definitely wanted to call out the idea of a formerly very, very good strikeout pitcher going at cheap price. But take it with a grain of salt, like I said. So we talked through the Diamondbacks lineup. We touched on Tommy Henry. So Tommy's got a 12.6% strikeout rate and a 9.8% walk rate in 6 starts, 34 innings, 5.99 xFIP, a 4.50 ERA. Anytime you see the xFIP worse than the ERA, especially by a run and a half, you know you're not looking at a very good pitcher. Only 33.6% hard hits, but a 9.1% barrel rate, 4.20% home run rate. I think he's targetable with some right-handed power from the Rockies lineup. I don't love going to this Rockies lineup, especially when they're on the road, but there's at least a couple interesting enough bats. There's the idea of power in the home run model here. You're certainly seeing a couple guys pushing the magic number slightly above or around. So I don't really buy Jurickson Profar. The 990 isn't incorrect. He's got 5 homers on the year. He can hit one out of the yard, but just a low-end player who's just stealing a job from a prospect at this point. Shouldn't be on the team. I don't know why I've gotten into the habit of bad-mouthing poor Jurickson Profar. I have nothing against the guy. I just don't think he's a very good player and shouldn't be here. But Grichuk has been outstanding, over 101 plate appearances. Hasn't hit for his usual power this season in terms of the home runs yet. A 144 ISO, only 1 home run in 101 plate appearances. But you can see 47.9% hard hit rate is up from last year. And he's a guy that we know has righty power. So I can buy into some idea of upside from Randal Grichuk here at a cheap price. Elias Diaz has been a very, very good catcher, 182 plate appearances. Nice little triple slash numbers, 28% better than average creating runs. So you get him at a fair price on the DK slate where you need catchers. I think he's viable at 2,800 on FanDuel if you want to just consider him a discount first baseman. Chris Bryant has struggled along this year. Ryan McMahon's been good this year, but suffers against left-handed pitching. I question whether that's a factor against Tommy Henry, right? Not all lefties are created equal. So a lefty who allows this much contact to a guy like Ryan McMahon, I don't think it's going to matter that it's coming from the same hand in this matchup. So I'm not as concerned about it as I would be against a much better lefty. I almost said Clayton Kershaw. Fucking duh. Of course I'm not as concerned about it as I would be against Clayton Kershaw. But, a slightly better lefty, I think I'd be a little bit more concerned about it. 13.5% barrels, 50.8% hard hit rate for McMahon this year. Decent little season. 8 home runs on the year, 223 ISO. Effective player. Brenton Doyle, aggressive strikeout rate in his 88 plate appearances at 36.4%. 229, 273, 434, 205 ISO, 4 home runs in 88 plate appearances. He's cheap, 13.7% barrel rate. Maybe you can throw him into some lineups against the lousy lefty. We've gotten some sneaky power out of him, and he's got a 10.90 in the home run model. So I do want to throw him into some of my lineups where I'm going to Rockies. I think 1 through 6, you're getting effective plays here. Elehuris Montero, if he's hitting 9th, or preferably if he's hitting higher in the lineup, could definitely be an interesting piece. 2,500, 2,200 at third base. High-end prospect for this team. 250, 291, 365 earlier in the season, 64 WRC+. If I remember correctly, he got banged up early in the season and went away. I forget if he went down or went to the IL, but he's back. Or potentially back tonight. So if he's in the lineup, I think he's definitely an interesting piece. I've called out some of their other prospects, so like if we get, it'd be weird to see Nolan Jones, a lefty, in the lineup today, but if he lands in the lineup, I think he's playable. They've got some interesting young bats, which is another reason that I think Jurickson Profar shouldn't be in the lineup. One of their young bats who maybe does need some more seasoning, though, Ezekiel Tovar, 68 WRC+, 3 home runs, 2 stolen bases, not getting on base at all, not hitting for any average, and 191 plate appearances. That's a fair sample at this point. So he might be a little bit undercooked. So we might see him go back down. Or, they don't really have anybody good to replace him with, so it's not like they need to send him back down. Just let him develop at this level. But He's not been good, is my point. I think Tovar is close to getting option. Yeah, that's kind of what I'm saying, Dev. It's not been pretty for him, but I don't know what their prospect pool at shortstop looks like, but there's probably a better option. So that rounds us off. That's pretty much the up and down of this slate. So we want to scroll over and take a look at the pitching board, like has become, I guess, our end of show tradition here. Scroll down and put this in the middle of the screen. So, like I said, 3 guys projected within a half point of one another there, with Blake Snell, Hunter Brown, and James Paxton. Snell obviously not on the DK slate, so you scratch off that option there. But we've got a solid handful of pitchers at the top of the board. Any one of these options, I have total faith in. Even Aaron Nola struggling, even James Paxton with those major question marks going up against Cincinnati. Like, I buy into these projections for these pitchers. These are arguably low projections for Nola and George Kirby. Matchups based, I hope that people go away from them. For Nola, for the current struggles. For George Kirby, for the lack of strikeouts on the surface, even though he's going up against the Yanks. And because he's going up against the Yanks, maybe we get him under-owned. So I like those 2 spots, and I think I agree with my model here. Louis Varland, I think, is playable, even though he only projects 22.8. Like I said, Schmidt, I definitely will push shares of. He's not projected great in the median there, but I think the 7,700 is a total buy for the strikeout upside for Schmidt. So I think I prefer him if I'm looking for value. I probably prefer him even to Louis Varland because Varland's a little bit more expensive. I certainly prefer him to Luke Weaver, if I'm not believing in one of these, it's definitely going to be Luke Weaver. But I said that about what's his name yesterday, and he went out and put up a 35 on FanDuel. Or did it get over 40? Did he get the win? I forget what happened in that, but the Red Starter had a decent game when we were talking about his strikeout upside. He was better for strikeout upside than Weaver looks here, but. At 82.79, it's not pretty. It's not one that you fully trust. But like I said, I think he's a little bit more talented than his reputation and his numbers have been so far. And it's not like this is a high-end projection, right? Totally skippable there. So my value play there is probably Clark Schmidt. And then Dinelson Lamet, who does not project well. But if you're going on DK, 5,100, you want to buy a few cheap strikeouts. I think there's potential there. But you definitely throw Arizona bats back against them the other way. All right. That's a lot of talking out of me. We've got an hour and 17. I think I went almost as long today for 6-7 games as I did for 13 games yesterday. Fun shit. All right. Good stuff, gang. Appreciate everybody hanging out. Hit the old like, hit the subscribe there. And good luck tonight. I'll be hanging around the Discord. Any questions, anything like that, feel free to chime in, ask me about anything you want. Join our Discord if you have not already. That said, good luck tonight, and we're punching out. See ya.